I'd like to welcome you to our Paperless Roadmap series called Capture. I'm Mary Martin. So let me introduce your applied imaging team. Some of these names may be familiar to you already. I'm Mary Martin. I'm the ECM event manager. Mike Heiser covers the east side of Michigan, down into northern Ohio, and our Tampa office. Steve Mayer covers the west side of Michigan into northern Indiana, and I am so excited today to have a special guest with us on this webinar, and that's Jennifer Olson from SciGen Software. So, you may think you know a lot about applied imaging, but the one thing you may not be aware of is all the different software solutions we have available. And you can see a list of them on the bottom down there. And we can cover everything from automating your AP process, onboarding, human resources, storing those records, workflows and collaborations. And the interesting one lately has been electronic forms. Since we've all gone remote, all those paper forms began to be a problem when offices weren't open, people weren't able to get out and fill things out. So that's been an interesting one to see really grow. So if you're using paper forms still, talk to us. And then robotic process automation. Now you're thinking robots? No, actually, they're little bots. They're doing those jobs that nobody in the office wants to do, all those manual, repetitive, mindless jobs, and they can have different softwares in your office talk together and upload information and share information. Talk to us about that as well. Contract management and more. So the bottom line is we've got you covered from top to bottom. ECM software solutions, you may know that is electronic content management. It might be document management, whatever you want to call it. It's basically taking that information and taking control of it. We also offer document and check scanners, backfile conversion. So today we're talking about capture, but let's say you've got rooms full of paper. Maybe you've got file cabinet, boxes. If you don't think that that's something your staff has time to deal with, we'll convert that for you. We'll scan it. And then you can upload it to software or wherever you want it to go at that point. Shred Hub, when you're done with that paper, we can make it disappear with our Shred Hub division, and they'll even give you a certified document of destruction. Print Smart, managed print services for all those printers in your office. NetSmart Plus, our IT network people, they help you with security, all of your IT needs from small all the way up to large. And finally, temperature measurement kiosk with facial recognition. Now, today you're in our webinar called Capture. It's part one on our Paperless Roadmap series. Coming up in May, Manage and Access. We're going to talk about collecting the information today, but what are you going to do with who has access to it? How are you going to manage it? We'll talk about that in May. August, we all have a lot of software programs and systems and things in place in our offices. How do you make them play together? How do you make them talk? That's going to be August. And in November, we're going to measure how everything is doing, but basically take a look at legacy records, legacy systems, all of that mature stuff that you have out there already. So here's our agenda for today. We're going to be talking about content management. What is it? The challenges related to capturing content. We're going to show you some tools for capture. That's where Jennifer comes in, a demo, and we're going to talk about the benefits of automating your capture, and of course, time for questions at the end. So let's take a look at content management. It's been interesting watching everything over the last year or so. There's something called unstructured content. Those things in your office. Oftentimes you think of PDFs, presentations, Word documents, pictures, all of that information that doesn't fit into columns and rows. So we're going to add to that now because we're now adding video and audio. If you're near or working with law enforcement, you may have the body cams, but more importantly, we're now doing a lot of things online. So those are being recorded and are being kept. And then we've got text messaging. The problem with all this unstructured data is it's unmanageable. In fact, interestingly enough, as you can see there, the IDC, an independent research group out there, said in the next 4 years, 80% of the worldwide data is going to be unstructured. So the question is, how do you get your arms around this? What do you do with it? And that's what we're going to talk about today, content management, how to manage that unstructured data, how to edit it, how to access it, who has access to it, how it's organized, retained, and better yet, when you're done, once you got the retention schedule taken care of, dispose of it after the fact. Okay, content capture challenges, the things that you probably are experiencing on a day-to-day basis. My guess would be on this one, you may feel like this at times as you're looking at this, but organizations today process vast amounts of documents, both digital and paper. We're coming in from all kinds of sources. Here's the interesting thing that the statistics have shown: 10,000 sheets of paper annually are being used by a single office worker. If you've got 20 people in your office, that's a lot of paper that's moving through the office. So, and that doesn't include digital copies, by the way. If everyone could mic, that would be awesome. Thank you. Capture challenges. Here's some things that's happening out there. I bet you feel like this, that you're getting things thrown at you literally from a number of sources. And basically what you're trying to do is chase that information and capture it in one area, be able to share it with the office staff so they can do something with it, and it can get processed. The problem is with a manual process, you lose time. Things are being routed through the office, departments, specific people, and now we have people in the field, remotely working, satellite offices. The challenge I saw early on with this, we had a client who called us who was in a bit of a panic. Their way of handling invoices was to literally print them out if they came in electronic or take them via mail, walk over to a set of mailboxes. You've seen them probably on the wall with everybody's name on it. They would put the invoice in there for the person who was supposed to respond or approve or reject it, and then hoped that they got to it and brought it back to the people in accounts payable. So when people started working remotely, that system didn't work at all. The other issue we see out there is no formal process. You know the people in your office that have their own way of doing things, their own system. Well, there's no consistency there, so now it's hard to train new employees. You can't cross-train anybody. It gets to be a real nightmare sometimes. And then there are the bottleneck people, or the bottlenecks in the process. You know the people. My favorite story was a woman went on vacation, locked a critical folder in her office, and then left. During the course of the next week's worth of business, they realized they needed that folder, and that's when they discovered nobody had a key to the person's office. They were stuck. So that's the problem with paper, is that you've got multiple sources of it, and when people have to review and approve it, things can get lost or put behind locked doors. And then, of course, we're all human. Data entry errors. We're going to make mistakes as we're fat fingering things, but if you're automating capture, you can eliminate those typos and make it a lot more accurate. I played with some numbers I thought you might find interesting here. If you had 100 documents a day that you were bringing in that you wanted to correctly file, it's going to take about 6 minutes for you to file those. Your staff, I did an average look out there for an AP person, for example. They're making about $18 an hour, so it's costing you 30 cents a minute. So one document is costing you $1.80 a day to file it manually. But we said you get 100 documents a day, right? $180 per day. And then there's 22 days in a month. You're now up to not $39.60 in cost for filing, and then multiply that by 12 months. And now you're at over $47,000. You know, that doesn't even cover benefits and insurance. And the other thing that struck me about this number, you're really double paying, or double cost if you think about it. You're paying the person to file it, but it's also costing you to file it. And I'm guessing that there's more than one person in the office filing the information, so multiply that by the number of people in your office. I want to thank Jennifer at SciGen for these statistics. She was sharing this with me. Now, this is an AP process, but keep in mind it could very well be HR. It could be any process that you have in the office. If you are manually filing an invoice, you know, it comes in the door, however it is. If it's electronic, you're printing it off. You're having to make sure you've got the packing slip. Maybe there's a bill of lading. Was there a purchase order attached to it? Did you get everything that you needed? By the time you're done moving through that process, it's cost you $22.75. If we automated that process, and that means it scanned in that invoice when it hits the office, the software looks at it, pulls all the correct index information to identify it and find it again, checks to see if you've got that purchase order, do you have the packing slip, do you have all the information, and automatically routes it off to the person who needs to approve it, all in seconds. $3.40 to handle that invoice. So what happens is, if you're manually processing an invoice, it takes about 16.3 days for that to move through your office. If you're automating it, and this is all the way to payment, mind you, 6.1 days. And we all love early payment discounts. Well, manual processes, those companies still using that, only 16% of them can take advantage of that early payment discount. Whereas if you are automated, how about 47%? Almost 50% there. And you know, when you're dealing in paper, things are going to get misfiled, they're going to get lost, you have to reproduce them again. And the interesting thing is, if you're in an automated system, nanoseconds can bring back something that even if you got put in the wrong folder or somewhere in that software, do a text search. There's a number of ways to bring it back in seconds. So you don't have that cost of finding it again or even reproducing it because you can find it. So the bottom line is automated AP processing greatly reduces and eliminates those lost documents and the errors. But you know, the other interesting thing is when you've got large quantities of documents, you know, you're talking about how and what you do with them to get them processed, but what happens to that information after you're done with it? What we've found is that a lot of that data ends up living in some sort of mission critical line of business system software out there. So the information needs to move out. You all have a variety of softwares I'm sure you're working with, from financial to HR to a number of other processes, and where that information may be now being manually keyed into that information. So at this point, I'm going to ask everybody to once again check your mics to make sure that you're muted, everybody, because I'm hearing some people. And I'm going to turn this over to Jennifer. And Jennifer, if you'd like to let me know when you'd like me to change a slide, please do so, and I'll go from there. Okay?
Okay, sounds good. Thank you so much, Mary, and hello, everyone. I'm Jennifer Olson with SciGen. So we're going to talk about and show some automated capture processes. So just reviewing what's on the screen right now, think of classification as identifying or recognizing, whether that's a vendor name, a document type, a form type, etc. Then once that document's been or vendor's been identified, what do you need us to extract from it? So what index fields that might have been previously keyed manually can we automatically extract? And again, the whole process is done automated in an automated fashion to recognize, to index, and then push those documents to OnBase or to whatever ECM or ERP system they need to go to. It can go to multiple places as well. If you've got an ERP system that you just need the data, and then perhaps you have an ECM system where you need the images and data to push to your content management solution. So that's the process. Go ahead and move to next slide, please. Okay, so SciCapture is the demonstration that we're going to see shortly. SciGen is the company, and just kind of the fun fact of the day is the PSI stands for Perfecting Simple Imaging. So SciCapture is our flagship product, and literally our reason for being is to reduce, if not all but eliminate, manual intervention, including indexing as well as some sorting functions as well. Okay, next. Okay, so just diving into classification a little bit more. Again, think of it as the software recognizing a vendor name or a document type. We're going to go through a couple demonstrations. One is accounts payable, where the software is going to recognize or classify on the vendor name and then extract the relevant fields, knowing where they are based on the vendor name. Another demonstration we're going to run through is HR. So in that case, we're recognizing a document type or a form type. So the software will differentiate between an I-9, a W-9, a request for time off, a performance appraisal, recognizing that document type and then extracting the relevant information for that document type. So there'll be fields like social security number, for example, that might be on an I-9 that certainly are not on a request for time off. So we're going to run through that. So part of the purpose as well of classification is to reduce sorting. For example, if you had a mixed bag, let's say you had invoices, shipping documents, POs, they don't have to be all separated. You have to scan all my invoices together and all my POs together. You don't, because it will tie everything together based on whatever criteria is consistent, whether it's vendor name, vendor number, customer number, account number, you name it, we can stitch all those back together. So again, we're going to see two short demonstrations that will show this. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so taking it one step further, we can extract, SciCapture can extract, and I'll use invoice as an example, header information, which would include things like PO number, invoice number, date, and total. Or we can also extract all of the line item details, which would include the description, the quantity, the unit price, the extended price. So we can capture all of the rows of all of the columns. Another thing SciCapture can do is in this type of scenario with an invoice that we're capturing line item detail on, is do some basic but important calculations. For example, if the unit price times the quantity does not multiply out correctly to what the software reads on the invoice, it can flag that as an exception, send someone an email alert to say, you've got an exception here, and then that image will come up when those exceptions are handled to show the field that's in question. So that's an option. So again, we can capture header data or line item details. Okay, next slide, please.
And this is where
so
I turn over to Jennifer here in just a minute, right, Jennifer?
Yep, absolutely.
Presenter, how's that? You are now the presenter. You want to show your screen? How's that?
Yeah, perfect. Okay, and again, as we go through this process, Mary mentioned it initially, but any questions that you have, if you can just put them in the chat, that would be perfect. Okay, so again, running through two pretty quick demos. Again, obviously this is a demonstration, so it is designed to stop at each step so we can see what happened and talk about what happened. So I've got a stack of invoices that I have previously scanned. So I'm just going to import them in, and there's just a handful of them. And then we are going to move it to the next step, which is to do that classification that we talked about. So it's going to go through the process of recognizing or classifying on the vendor names and then extracting header data. So that would include PO number, invoice number, date, and total. The screens that you're seeing now would all be happening behind the scenes in a live environment. Again, the demo is structured to show you each step and stop at each step so we can review things. But again, in a live environment, no one would need to monitor this or watch this or push this forward to the next step. This would all be an automated process. Okay, so we've got it stopping in a quality assurance step. So I've got my metadata here and my images here. So if I'm a knowledge worker on the system and I wanted to just do a quick spot check, if you will, I can click on any of these fields and the software will zoom in and highlight that value. So I can just double check anything, I can click through. There's a number of audits and rules that can be built in, so someone doesn't necessarily need to do this, but I just wanted to show you what our results were of running through the demo. Now, if I'm just looking at these amounts, this is kind of an outlier. It's much higher than the rest. So maybe, again, I'm a knowledge worker on the system. I want to just double check that because it's so much higher than the other amounts. And indeed, it is correct. Now, in this case, with our vendor labor ready, I don't see a purchase order number. So I can click on this. It will show me the image. I can look at the document and determine, well, indeed, there is not a purchase order number. This vendor doesn't put their PO numbers on invoices. So we're good. If for any reason there was a value there and maybe it was obstructed by a staple or for whatever reason the software couldn't read it, this is live data, so I could actually enter it and then that will follow the record through the migration. Any of the fields that are indexed can be made to be required or not required. So in this case, since we know, the software knows that Labor Ready doesn't have PO numbers on the invoice, this does not flag as an error. If this was a required field, this would have flagged as an exception. And again, someone would have gotten an email alert to say, hey, you've got an exception to go back and handle later on in the process. So that's our QA step. At this point, then this would move forward to what we call migration, but you can call it push or publish. I don't have a migration built in for this demo, but again, this could have been on its way to OnBase or QuickBooks or pretty much name it, and it would be on its way or migrated out to that. Okay, so we're going to run through one more, just a completely different use case, which is HR. And again, these were previously scanned documents, and that's two different people's files, and it's just a whole slew of HR type documents, again, including onboarding documents, I-9s, W-9s, requests for time off, performance appraisal. So we're bringing the documents in, and this one won't end up in the same type of QA step, but you'll see the process as we go along and we push it forward. So we've done classification, not on the vendor name this time, but on the document type or form type, because again, very different fields would be required for an I-9 versus a performance appraisal. So we're going through the classification steps, just like we did on the invoices, identifying the form type or the document type, and then extracting the relevant index fields that in a manual environment would need to be keyed. But in this case, they don't need to be keyed. So it's going to go through the process. The next screen is going to look a little bit different, but I'll show you how it captured the different fields based on the form type or the document type. So it's going to stop here. It's doing the indexing, so you can see the different document types. And then you'll see the index start to fill in the index field as it comes to each document type or form type. So let me make this guy smaller. Okay, so for example, so W-9, these are the fields that were extracted or required. Now, if I go to a performance appraisal, very, very different fields necessarily that are necessary to capture. So different document types. You can see that there are multiple pages. It recognizes what the form type is and grabs the relevant information from it. So again, it's recognized what is this, and now what do I need to do with that? So that's all part of SciCapture and making this process automated so that someone doesn't need to manually key it or file it or anything along those lines of manual intervention or extra steps. So this one does have a migration built in it, so we can just talk to it because this is just pushing out to a Windows folder. And since we only have 2 employees, it makes it pretty easy. But I'll show you just really quick. So we pushed it to a Windows folder. So I have 2 employees. I have Marcus Brewer, and then I have all of his documents. Let me get rid of this. Sorry, this go to meeting. Then let's go back up to the next person, which would be John Smith. So he's under S, and then there's all his documents as well. So that wraps up the 2 demonstrations. Again, any questions that you have, please put them in the chat. Mary, I don't know if you want to pause for a second to see if there are any questions before we move on.
Thanks, Jennifer. There are. I'm going to kind of save those for the end in case we cover some things that might be in those questions, if that's okay.
Okay, absolutely.
Then they give them a chance to think through. That was a lot of great information. And the one thing I'm going to stress to everybody is that happens behind the scenes. It is all automated. I mean, I know you're sitting there thinking, wow, there's a lot happening here. Think of that all, how do I phrase it, as a little elves behind the scenes doing everything for you, so you're not manually having to do that, which is important on that part of it. So let's talk about the benefits of what you just saw, that automated capture, as we were looking through there. The key thing is, with replacing physical documents with the digital copies, you've reduced a clutter in your workplace. We've all been in those offices where you think there's been a paper explosion that's gone on. So what you've done is improve clarity and availability. Now the documents are digital. They can be accessed by anybody who's authorized to get into them. So you can put a password in the front door. Maybe somebody in HR can only see their documents, can't see the AP documents, and they can access from any device in the office or remotely, which is so important today. Your productivity just got enhanced. If you thought about that with that automated data capture, it's automatically organizing it, extracting information, it's distributing it to the people that need to be looking at it, reviewing it, and so forth. No human involvement and as part of that process. So it's not only faster, it's more accurate because you're reducing errors. You've eliminated those. In fact, studies have proven the main reason an organization looks at data capture automation is because of eliminating errors. That's the main reason. There's a lot of other really good reasons, but that's the top one. So the bottom line is you save time, money, and resources. You all know if you streamline your processes, take the people out of it, repurpose them, or have them do the things that they're really good at and that you need them to do, your organization is now more efficient. And when your organization is more efficient, you're going to save money, you're going to save time, daily operations, and everything are going to benefit right down to customer service along the way. So I can imagine what you're thinking. You know, Mary, I've seen a lot of this. This is great information, but where do I start? This is wow. So here's what I recommend. Examine your current process. Now, you may have more than one process in place. Ask questions. Get those people that are in the trenches involved to see what they're doing, how they're doing things, what their pain is, what are the various types of processes, but also take a look at the documents that are moving through your organization. Is there things in paper like forms that could be automated, things that could be changed dramatically to make it flow a lot differently? And how does it flow through the organization? Who needs access? Who's approving things? All of that you need to ask, and I would document it in writing. And talk to the users in the trenches and those people involved about where the problem areas are. They'll be more than happy to tell you where their pain is, I promise you. And of course, there's one more important step, and that is reach out to Applied Imaging. You know, if you're ready to make your data capture process as painless and efficient as possible, we're here to help. We have a lot of expertise that we can bring forward, even to help you analyzing your process if that's more than you want to tackle, right down to supplying ideas and thoughts and ways of handling things. No obligation for that part of it. Just get a hold of us at 800-521-0983 or email us at marketing@appliedimaging.com. So I'm going to slide into questions here and see what we have. Jennifer, is there anything more that you want to add at this point that you can think of?
Nope. I don't think so. Well, I'll just stay tuned to see what the questions might be.
Okay, here's one. They ask, what if I don't have a system that I want to migrate the data to? Can I just get the information in Excel or something similar?
Yes, absolutely. We can output it any number of ways. We can output to a CSV or an Excel spreadsheet or a Windows folder, like something very basic like that. So absolutely, you don't have to have a back-end content management system to migrate to.
Excellent, thank you. Speaking of back-end systems, will this, what we've seen today, work with most of what's out there? Are there any things that we need to know about that?
So yes, so as far as migrating out, we've got, gosh, I think the number's right around 65 direct migrations built to the usual suspects of content management, including things like OnBase and SharePoint. If someone is using a proprietary system or something we don't have a direct migration built to, all we need to know is what does the data need to look like to import into the system. So again, that could be a CSV file, that could be an XML, it could be a flat file, really delimited however you like. We can send it to a staging database. So there's really any number of ways that we can migrate out if for some reason we don't have a direct migration already built.
Awesome. One more question came in. Is this mostly for scanned documents or can this include emails, faxes, and so forth?
Oh, great question. And actually, I'm really glad that question came up because I should have mentioned that. So there's a number of ways to get things into SciCapture. Certainly direct scan is one of them. We can also monitor one or more network folders, so potentially different locations, monitor those, and then sweep the folder and ingest those into SciCapture. We can grab emails, and that would include not only the attachment, but also any part of the body, including the to, the from, the subject. We can ingest things from a fax server or certainly a direct import, whether it's TIFF or JPEG or PDF. We can also import, we call it extended file format. So if you have an Excel spreadsheet or Word document or an XML file or a CSV file, we can ingest that regardless of the type of document. So lots of different ways to get things into SciCapture, or a combination of those ways.
Excellent. Somebody just asked, okay, if you're scanning things, what happens if the scan quality is low?
So the software, so depending on the document, obviously there is some enhancement and correction that the software can do. It can increase the contrast, it can despeckle, deskew, cropping at that type of process. So it's kind of a two-phased approach. So needless to say, you want to try to get the best quality scan that you can. But if the images that you have, maybe they were previously scanned and the quality isn't perfect, that would be something that, again, we can make a number of enhancements to it to increase the OCR accuracy. But that would be a key scenario where I would recommend that you engage with Applied Imaging, have them evaluate some samples. They can test them, or they, in conjunction with us, can test them just to see what your OCR accuracy rate is depending on the quality of the document.
And what I'm hearing you say is they can be enhanced to improve quality. So if they were boxed in 1963, chances are you can probably still use them. So.
Well, yeah, I mean, just going back to our roots quickly, we have been around for about 25 years, and we started in the service bureau industry.
Oh.
And I think there is no varying quality of documents than in a service bureau, because it's lots of different customers, lots of different qualities, old things that have been sitting in boxes, things that perhaps it's faded, or it's a colored document, so the ink on it isn't a sharp contrast. So that's where we cut our teeth, and that's where we really developed the software. So we can work with a surprising range of image quality.
Good. Well, here's one for you. Does it work with handwritten items? Somebody asked.
I'm sorry, what was that?
Does it work with handwritten items? Somebody asked.
Okay, so for handwriting, it would need to be constrained hand print. So think of the little boxes that you might fill out a form and you put a letter or number in each box. We can do that. That's intelligent character recognition, or ICR. So we can do that, no problem at all. For unconstrained handwriting, so for example, there's a line that says date and someone handwrites in the date. We really can't do that. We can take a stab at it, and if someone has very good writing, we actually can read it, but I certainly wouldn't want to rely on it. But to give you an example where we've used kind of a combination of that was in a time card that people filled out, and they did have the boxes. So they would put, again, a number or a letter in a box, so that's no problem. But then they had to sign their time card. So we can't read the signature, but we can determine if something's there. So then the output, we created another, think of the QA screen that you saw. We created another column that had basically yes or no. Yes, we detected a signature there, or no, there was no signature, because obviously they can't accept a time card that's not signed. So we can detect if something's there, but it's just as far as unconstrained handwriting, that's not our strength.
Okay. Another question, do you help train key users so we can get the most from the software?
Yes, absolutely. So if you would work on a project with Applied Imaging, once you move forward with it, the determination would be made how much setup Applied Imaging would install it, would train the users, et cetera, and do some of the configuration of the capture profiles. as part of their training, that is an option for them or SciGen, but it's usually applied imaging, can train you how to train the system. So what do you do when a new, I'll use an accounts payable example, a new vendor comes in that the system hasn't seen. So that one's really easy to train on the fly. Just a knowledge worker that sees it just literally does a couple of point and clicks and it's trained and it knows about that vendor going forward. But the answer is yes, we can absolutely train you to do the profile configuration or troubleshoot it so that you can be very self-sufficient.
Thank you. That's a good point. Applied is with you every step of the way, from helping you in the discovery if you need help there, with designing, implementation, training, and anything that happens afterwards, like as Jennifer said, I have a new vendor, how do I get them in? That sort of thing. So we're with you every step of the way. And you know, there isn't much training involved with this because a lot of it is behind the scenes. If you've already figured that out by watching this happen, that a lot of it is in the planning stages and the implementation that we're heavily involved in. So you tell us what you want and we make it work, bottom line kind of thing. So there's very, very little training involved. I think that's all our questions, Jennifer. I want to thank you again for jumping in with me today.